By the deal that has not happened as it was expected to. Israel delayed it, citing last-minute issues. Again, what this now means exactly for the phased-in ceasefire and hostage deal, it's unclear. It's all supposed to begin on Sunday. Under the deal, Hamas has agreed to release 33 hostages in the first phase. Israel agreed to release 1,000-plus Palestinian prisoners. All of that resulting in a 42-day ceasefire with hopes it leads to a permanent one. Let's get to CNN's Bianna Gold.
Wow. Maybe now the media will report on what's going on accurately. I wonder who the responsible party is for messing up the ceasefire negotiations once again. I wonder if it's Hamas or if it is, for the 15th month in a row, Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. I wonder who is, after like the 8th time that they've actually signed off on an agreement. It seems strange to me. I wonder who is the responsible party.
Rodriguez, she's live in Tel Aviv with much more on this. Bianna, help us understand, what is the status here? What is the latest?
Good morning to you. So all of these things remain rather fluid, but the latest, it does appear to be just a delay in the process of getting a security cabinet and ultimately a party cabinet vote in the government here. As you noted, Prime Minister Netanyahu blaming Hamas for what he says is reneging on parts of the deal. Hamas, for their part, are denying those allegations. Everyone I'm speaking with here still believes, though, that a ceasefire deal will go into place, as had been agreed upon beginning Sunday night, where we would see the first hostages in phase 1 of those 33 released here to Israel. Hospitals have been on standby and ready to receive those hostages. In terms of the politics of it all, Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing a lot of headwinds, as we've been reporting now for months, from the far-right elements specifically of his government, of his coalition, who do not want to agree to a deal under these terms. What the latest we have is that Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has said that his party would agree to stay with the coalition through phase 1 of the deal, that is the release of those 33 hostages and the pause in fighting, only if the fighting would be allowed to proceed again after phase 1. So there you just get a sense of how fluid and fragile this deal is right now. But Kate, when it comes to the hostages coming home in phase 1, as you noted, it would be the women, it would be children, it would be men over the age of 50 and those who are critically wounded. And among those women are 5 IDF spotters, our soldiers. Reminder that everyone in Israel is required.
Yeah, Israeli military members are still considered hostages, but Palestinian civilians, 10,000 of them, are considered prisoners, which is, again, doublespeak for the record. Like, just so you understand, it's a part of manufacturing that same exact consent that that the media routinely engages in, right? Like, we're talking women and children that have been falsely detained by the Israeli government. They're being considered as prisoners. The numbers are like 10,000 at this point.
Required to serve in the military. These 5 IDF spotters, all young, the ages of 19 to 21. I spoke.
Yeah, these children, who also are generals, by the way. Yeah, look, you don't understand. These guys are all young. They're just spotters. They're just spotters. Like, no, they're a part of the military. They're a part of the military that's currently engaging in an ethnic cleansing campaign. Like, that's crazy. They're not hostages in that regard. They would be prisoners of war.
Spoke with the cousin of one of them, that Agam Berger's cousin. She is 20 years old. I spoke with her cousin about what this moment may feel like for them when they are finally reunited, and why there's a bittersweet sense in the country right now.
She's a beautiful young girl who's been 15.
Like, stories exactly like this one. For the record, I'm not discounting that these people have their own personal stories and their personal upbringing and their, and the role they play in the lives of those who love them. Okay. But I also want you to understand that, like, each individual Palestinian has the exact same story as well. So remember what the media in the Western world especially pays attention to, and how they treat Israeli occupying force soldiers that are held captive versus the thousands of women and children that have been falsely imprisoned in perpetuity by the Israeli government in the maintenance of an apartheid and how they get presented. This framing is very important because it reinforces the humanity of each individual Israeli. It actually reinforces the dehumanization of each individual Palestinian. Your hatred of Israel blinds you. What point do you feel like I am blinded? Like, what do you think? What do you mean by that? Because I already said that, of course, every single Israeli that's being held captive is a human being with lives and loved ones, okay, that miss them. Okay? I get that. I understand that. But do you think that each individual Palestinian that is in the same exact predicament, if not worse predicaments overall, in terms of like legal permissibility, in terms of international human rights, and Israel's routine violation of that at the behest of maintaining an apartheid state? Is your argument simply that I hate Israel and that's why I recognize Palestinians as humans? Perhaps. I wish to run into you one day in the street and break both of your kneecaps. Hasan Piker says Xander Macha. Good luck, brother. Good luck on that. Not all of us agree with our government. Wait, what? I never said that. What are you talking about? I've never said that all Israelis 100% agree with their government. You just made that up. Also, the person who said this, you will not be doing that. You won't be doing that at all, as a matter of fact. If anything, if you were to actually see me out in the wild, okay, you would probably behave like a fan and try to get a photo and say how much you actually appreciate my commentary. You wouldn't dare to try to behave in the way that you claim that you would. At most, you would be in a Discord server talking about how you were going to quote unquote troll me and how much you were pissing your pants in that moment. But yeah, once again, going back to this other chatter, not the one who wants to break my kneecaps or whatever. I don't maintain this position. I don't know why you think I've said this. Does it make you feel like it's a better argument that you can present? Is that what it is? You know, I'll wait for your response. A lot of this conversation basically devolves into that. Like the notion that Palestinians are not human and only Israelis are the real humans in this equation. Palestinians are faceless, lifeless, hive-minded, parasitic forces that are constantly threatening the existence of the real humans in the region, the only people in the region, okay? And many people's primary assumption is that, and they just operate off of that. You know what I mean? So much, if you were to potentially go back as an Israeli, completely support better future for the Palestinians, people and their families, they are people just like us. It's important you remember that many of us do. Yeah, except I do know that. Okay, I don't know if your perspective is commonly shared, because there is polling conducted inside of Israel regularly where many Israelis agree with the consistent genocide, the offensive genocidal siege that Israel has implemented, the Israeli occupying forces implemented on the Gaza Strip. But having said that, if you were in here long enough, you'd recognize that I talk to my Israeli chatters with regular frequency, and I even talk to members of the Knesset, and even talk to conscientious objectors, and rely on Israeli sources of investigative reporting with regular frequency, once again. So just so you understand, there are plenty of Israeli chatters in here right now in this community. I'm probably one of the only places where they have access to even watching the likes of Al Jazeera, for example, since your government banned it. Anyway, but yeah, having said that, this is not a, you're arguing against a thing that I don't believe. Let's continue.
Months in the hands of people that we know committed the worst atrocities against women in one day. We know what they did on October 7th. We also know from released hostages who came home what they did to hostages in captivity. That's the biggest fear. The physical aspect of it, and I don't need to go into detail. I think everyone who's watching understands what that fear means. But more importantly, the mental and emotional aspect of what kind of trauma something like that can do to a young girl who's 20 years old, who has her whole life ahead of her.
All right, Bianca Golodriga for us in Tel Aviv. Bianca's going to be all over it. A lot of developments could be coming on this today.
David Sanger, let me start with you. You, of course, have been covering this deal closely. Is there anything to this last-minute hiccup with the Israeli?
I thought you'd ban the kneecap, dude. Nah, I mean, I'm not afraid of it. And I'm sure issuing a direct threat to the streamer is a site-wide ban anyway, so I suspect that regardless of whether or not I ban that person, they probably will get banned across the board from Twitch permanently. Yeah. See? Very stupid thing to do, honestly. We're going to talk about the reporter that was dragged away from the State Department briefing in a second.
Cabinet, how serious is that here?
It could be. We don't know yet. I do know that up to the last few hours before they announced the agreement yesterday, Casey, Hamas was coming up with sort of last-minute things they were putting on the table. It's a very usual technique on their part, and the question is, can that be put down?
This is just an alternative reality. They are existing in a totally different plane of existence, okay? It's completely, simply put, this is just a lie, okay? That's it. It's just a lie. You're in opposite world. It feels as though you are just lying and going along with what the State Department has said over and over again, in spite of what people can see with their own two eyes, right? It's such a weird thing to do over and over again when, it's the easiest thing to disprove. The notion that it's actually Hamas that's ruining these ceasefire negotiations and not Israel is ridiculous. It is completely made up. It is the exact opposite. I cannot stress this enough. And we have shown numerous examples, time and time again. The narrative being pushed today by Israel is that Hamas is reneging on the terms of the Gaza agreement, but as it has been from the start, it is actually Netanyahu. The Prime Minister's office announced on Thursday morning that the IDF would not withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor during the first phase of the hostage deal on Thursday morning. Contrary to misleading reports, Israel is not withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor. Israel will remain in Phase A in the corridor for an entire 42-day period, the statement said. The scope of forces will remain at its current size, but will be deployed differently, encompassing outposts, patrols, observations, and control along the entire corridor. So they won't let the Rafah border open, okay? They won't let Gaza and Egypt take control over their own borders, which is a non-starter for understandable reasons. If you still control the humanitarian aid that's going into the Gaza Strip through the Rafah corridor, through the Philadelphia corridor, through the Rafah border, you're not withdrawing. You're not retreating at all. The scope of forces will remain at its current size, but will be deployed differently, encompassing outposts, patrols, observations, and control along the entire corridor. During Phase A, starting on the 16th day, negotiations will begin on ending the war. If Hamas does not agree to Israel's demands for ending the war, achieving war's objectives, Israel will remain in the Philadelphia corridor on the 42nd day and consequently beyond the 50th day. In practical terms, Israel will remain in the Philadelphia corridor until further notice, the statement concluded. Now, this right here is unacceptable for understandable reasons. This is not a cessation of hostilities. This is not a ceasefire. And I'll give you evidence to understand if you are still confused by this process. It's like Vladimir Putin saying, no, you don't understand. We are still going to maintain troop presence along virtually every part of Ukraine. Like, we're going to shut off Ukraine from Poland and many other bordering nations, and we are going to maintain troop presence to ensure that we completely encircle Ukraine. Now, of course, Ukraine is a much larger country, and it's not like a concentration camp that Israel has maintained for the past 76 years. So obviously, it's virtually impossible militarily to even do such a thing. But like, it is ridiculous. If Vladimir Putin was like, no, you don't understand, like, we are going to literally do that, everyone would say, yeah, that's insane. That is not a cessation of hostilities at all. Okay. What's Trump's play? Just pretend Israel's acting in good faith and take the W? I mean, I don't think he can. I don't think he can get away with it, just like Biden couldn't get away with it. So who knows? We'll see. We'll see how Trump differs from Biden on this. At least he understands who he's supposed to be pressuring in this regard. You know what I mean? So far, with the way that the negotiations have actually moved, and I don't know if there's a carrot and a stick, where the carrot is basically you can go back to bombing Gaza or annexing the West Bank later down the line, but and the stick being, if you don't actually pull this ceasefire before my inauguration, I'm going to literally stop giving you weapons. But one thing remains clear: if you want to understand the truth of the matter, it is obvious that it's not Hamas that's ruining the ceasefire negotiations. They have said yes to this since July 2nd. Okay, it is the same. It is a version of Trump warns Israeli officials against restarting hostilities in Lebanon, reports the Jerusalem Post. Crisis between Israel and the U.S. Trump warns against collapse of Lebanon ceasefire exclusive. Sources close to the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump have reportedly conveyed a stern warning to Israeli officials. Israel since last night have increased their bombings and targeting of civilians, according to on-the-ground press. They're telling civilians to be even more careful than usual. Yeah, no, I know that. That could be two different things, though. That could be because Israel always increases hostilities before the last second of the ceasefire, which is gross, but that is expected. What? Are you jealous? Asmongold is getting a bunch of clout of Elon's weekly e-beef number 84. Why would I be jealous of that? I personally love that they're beefing. I covered it earlier. It was awesome. I don't care about the quote unquote clout that Asmongold gets out of it. I already covered it. It was great. I'm a fan. It's free viewers. I mean, okay. That's a very weird and cynical way to approach the subject matter from your perspective. In any case, yeah, more people recognize that Elon Musk is a fraudulent, narcissistic, thin-skinned man-child is good in my book. It's A-okay. Anyway, you cannot convert them, brother. Read the Shahada. So much swab. What? I have no idea what you're talking about.
But the bigger question is, who's right in this dispute between the two? And the answer is really both. So the deal is essentially what President Biden laid out in May. It also, you may notice, this is January. So, that deal did not happen. And I think the fact that they did link up so well, and that Steve Witkoff, who is President Trump's incoming Mideast advisor, was out there in lockstep with Brett McGurk, who is President Biden's equivalent for that, and has worked for Republican presidents as well. I think that made the difference because they were able to go to Netanyahu, send Witkoff, and say, this is the deal that Trump wants. And I think that sort of helped put it over the marker.
David, Tom Malinowski, who's a former Democratic congressman, he put out a very interesting thread on Twitter, the first of which says that this was Biden's deal, but as much as I hate to say it, he couldn't have done it without Trump. Not so much Trump's performative threats to Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Hamas is already under maximum pressure, okay? It's called, being genocided. There's no more pressure that you can put on Hamas than genocide, okay? You're genociding the Palestinian population in its entirety. There's no more pressure in that regard. That's the maximum thing that you can do. The difference here is Trump actually went to the responsible party and applied pressure to the responsible party. Also, why would you want to pressure? How would you pressure Hamas on a deal that they have presented since May, a deal that they signed off on since July? It makes no sense. Trump didn't do shit. Everyone's gullible suddenly. Hello? Wait, what? No, you have to understand. You have to understand. Trump did do things, most likely very bad things. Okay? But in the interim, something that had to be done, which was to apply pressure to Benjamin Netanyahu's side. And that's the only reason why Israel was like, all right, we're going to vote for this. We're going to pass the ceasefire. But now Benjamin Netanyahu's going back on it. The situation right now, if Jay Post is right, Trump told Bibi he'd let Israel violate the ceasefire, keep sending arms, and lift sanctions on extremist/settlers. Despite these guarantees, Bibi still refused to sign the ceasefire, publicly says he wants to effectively nullify it by changing its terms to keep troops in Gaza until Hamas surrenders, and lies about Hamas sabotaging it. The ball is in Trump's court now. Exactly. No, I don't disagree with this. I agree with this. It's entirely dependent on what Trump does from this point on until the inauguration. Will he actually hold Benjamin? It's also entirely dependent on the ceasefire, accepting whether or not Israel will accept the ceasefire. We'll find out tomorrow, okay, or in a couple hours, like I guess like 12 hours or so. But what you have to understand here is that Trump's pressure that led to Benjamin Netanyahu saying he was going to sign off on this, that led to Joe Biden coming out and saying the deal is done, Israel actually signed off on it, is yet another instance where like some additional factor applied extra pressure for this conversation to move. Okay. Now, does that mean that weapons transfers were on the table? I don't know. But your phrasing makes it seem like Trump personally did something and cares. No, I've never said that Trump cares about Palestinians. I've always maintained the position that Donald Trump does not care about Palestinians and most likely cut a side deal, which, I'm speculating that he most likely cut a side deal with Benjamin Netanyahu, whether it be permanent annexation of the West Bank or whether it be even in the interim period, a potential to throw the ceasefire negotiations aside. But the problem here is that outside of that side deal, there was definitely additional pressure applied. Now, we'll see if that pressure worked, okay? If that pressure worked, we will see come tomorrow. But the only thing in this equation that was new was basically Donald Trump and Witkoff appearing as like the spokesperson for Donald Trump.
But his willingness to tell Bibi bluntly that the war had to end by January 20th. And he essentially goes on to say that while Biden did a great job working with European leaders, he did not bring the sort of thuggery to the table that is required in the Middle East. Do you think Malinowski's right about this?
I think he's absolutely right. And the reason that I would say that is, first of all, the relationship between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu is poisonous would be a polite phrase for the term, okay? And
no, this isn't Trump's deal. This isn't Biden's deal. This isn't Israel's deal. This is Hamas's deal that Hamas presented in the early stages of February and then openly presented in May. The deal that Biden put forth in July 2nd that seemingly everyone was in line with, that Biden presented as Israel's very own deal, is the exact same deal. Okay. Benjamin Netanyahu throughout this process has added additional poison provisions into it in an effort to continue bombing Gaza, in an effort to refuse to negotiate. If you want to cut this deal, it requires one singular phone call. Not a phone call to Hamas envoys, a phone call to Benjamin Netanyahu. I've been saying this for months. The party that is ruining this deal and refusing to abide by it is not Hamas. It's Benjamin Netanyahu. It's Israel. And the reality of the matter is, it's not even an exact comparison to Ronald Reagan, because Reagan was dealing with foreign adversaries, not with Israel. Okay? You don't understand. That's what makes the situation so much worse for Joe Biden in terms of how he chose not to deal with the problem and only escalate it. Because Israel would not exist without our unlimited support, without our unlimited political cover, and without our unlimited weapons transfers. Israel would run out of bombs a week in, okay? Maybe a month maximum. I have repeated this true fact over and over again for the past 15 months, okay? But unfortunately, the way that the media covers this is so built on top of this falsehood that they are repeating from the State Department that there is numerous reporting to suggest is completely incorrect, okay? That people just simply cannot comprehend that it is Israel that is the spoiling party. So therefore, it is Israel that you have to apply pressure to. And in this case, you have endless amounts of power to apply pressure to Israel. Endless amounts of power. Because Israel is our colonial vestige. Israel is our weapon to wield in the region. That's it. That's what makes it so much worse for Biden. Especially because Biden tries to maintain, or Democrats try to maintain, this like aesthetic that they are peace lovers, but simply are held up and they can't get both sides to agree to this ceasefire negotiation, when in reality it's not both sides that aren't agreeing, it's Benjamin Netanyahu that's not agreeing.
second, the fact that they were able to send Witkoff, not Brett McGurk, but Witkoff, on Saturday to see Netanyahu and say, President Trump wants this resolved before Inauguration Day, in part so that it's not on him to go, be the one who was squeezing the Israelis. I don't think the Israelis would have made the deal. I think they would have just said, well, let's just see what we get out of Trump.
Interesting. Mike Dubke?
Well, first, on a serious matter, what's amazing to me is America matters. I mean, that's at the end of the day, what other country, we can have this argument about Trump or Biden, but what other country can step into an international conflict and really have the level of influence that we did in this? So to David's point, I mean, America matters. On the more of a lighthearted side, I'm sick and tired of these two arguing about golf scores. I'm sick and tired of these two arguing about who mattered. The fact that these two gentlemen got together, told their people to get this done, that's what's important here. I wish they would just both take the victory and be happy that we have a ceasefire after all these months.
Yeah, Haima, what do you make? I mean, obviously, President Biden, we have seen, clearly is not ready to exit, especially the world stage.
I don't know. I mean, I can't see this as anything but just like people lying in the most Reddit. The Reddit phenomena that I talk about all the time, which is like sometimes you'll see someone like basically comment something that is completely incorrect. And then there's like 11 subsequent comments replying to that, making jokes about that lie. but we've now established that lie as like the truth, and people are just circle jerking around this like abject lie. That's precisely what's happening on CNN this morning with Casey Hunt. Like, not a single person on this panel is going, hey guys, it kind of doesn't make sense that this deal looks identical to the deal that Hamas presented. It kind of doesn't make sense that, like, for the past, I guess, 15 months, or at least for the past 8 months, Biden has claimed that this is his deal, even though initially he said it was Israel's deal, and Israel itself never actually agreed to its own deal. Like, what are we supposed to make of this? It's like not that complex. It's not that complex at all. Many people can see the truth in this regard. So I don't know what purpose this serves in terms of just like still in this final hour, these guys are still operating on this false notion that it's actually the pressure that must be applied to Hamas because they're just not willing to agree to the terms of these, willing to agree to the ceasefire negotiation. It doesn't make any sense. All you're doing is trying to, I guess, use the crumb of credibility that you have still with like 90-year-olds into believing a false notion, into believing something that is patently untrue that you can openly see. It's so strange. It's definitely strange, especially happening at a time when obviously like mainstream media has lost so much credibility.
Place that he has always really, he's valued his role as, even when he was in the Senate and he was on the Foreign Relations Committee, he clearly doesn't want to give all the credit to Donald Trump. But I will say the people that work for him have been willing to do it.
Yeah, look, I agree with Mike. I think people across the country are sick of the back and forth. I think people want to see some bipartisanship. And so for the start of this new administration, I think this is a good sign that there could be some glimmers of hope for bipartisanship. But secondly, look, I think President Biden and Vice President Harris have been clear about their stance on this, and they've worked very hard to get here. And so, yes, I do think Donald Trump helped push this over, but I don't want to take the credit away from the president and the vice president. They were very clear about this deal. They were very dogged about it. They wish this would have happened in May, but it did not. But I think you're right. President Biden's having a hard time this week. He has a couple of days left in office. He's enjoyed being president. It was not his choice to not be president. Let's just be honest about that. But it's going to be tough for him as he watches Donald Trump take office again. You remember when he took office a couple years ago, he wanted to save this country's soul. He doesn't really feel like he's done that. So I do think there's some things that he's grappling with over the next couple of days that are going to be tough for him.
David, one thing that has hung over this deal is, of course, if assuming that this stays on track and we see these hostage releases on Sunday, is going to be the imagery and the parallels for an outgoing President Biden with an outgoing President Carter. Jimmy Carter reflected a little bit on this dynamic back in an interview he did in 2015. I want to watch that and then we'll talk about it.
I hadn't been to bed for 3 days and 3 nights. I had just been negotiating with the Iranians and with 12 other countries to get the release of our hostages who had been in prison for more than a year. And at 9 o'clock that morning, they were already in the airplane ready to take off from Tehran. But the Ayatollah Khomeini kept them there until after I was no longer president.
And your colleague Peter Baker in his analysis mentioned that this has been hanging over this is something the White House is very aware of. The president's aides have been very aware of. How does this kind of echo today?
Well, first of all, this could well spill into Monday. It could spill beyond. Hamas at various moments made the argument they weren't certain where all of the hostages were. The second reason that this may hang over is the great thing about the Jimmy Carter tape that you showed there is all the hostages walked off the plane.
Right.
And here we know that of the numbers that we're hearing, not everyone is alive. And some of those hostages are going to, come back as remains. And so this is going to be both joyous and soul-crushing at the same moment. And it's also going to make you wonder, had the deal been able to come together earlier, how many of those lives could have been saved?
The most necessary thing.
The Israelis claim Hamas reneged on parts of the ceasefire deal. Hamas officials say it isn't true. This comes amid the backdrop of internal political pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Statements.
Here's Trey Yingst, who is the chief foreign correspondent for Fox News, reporting on the matter. I'm sorry, but the fact that Trey Yingst at Fox News is saying this from Tel Aviv, and he is outflanking CNN, is so unacceptable. Okay.
This is an important update. There is a crisis as it relates to the ceasefire agreement reached last night. The Prime Minister's office here in Israel just released a statement saying Hamas reneged on parts of the agreement reached with mediators and Israel in an effort to extort last-minute concessions. The Prime Minister's office goes on to say there will be no cabinet vote until mediators inform Israel that Hamas has agreed to all parts of the deal. This is significant, and it comes amid the backdrop of increased domestic political pressure against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose own finance minister Bezalel Smotrich threatened to leave the government if a deal was reached.
Never mind. He didn't actually say what I think he said in here.
Hamas reneged on parts of the agreement reached with mediators and Israel in an effort to extort last-minute concessions. The Prime Minister's office goes.
He tweeted out something different. The Israelis claim Hamas reneged on parts of the ceasefire deal. Hamas officials say this isn't true. Why didn't he mention that in the? He didn't mention that at all. He tweeted it. This part does not exist in the video. Interesting. Anyway, if Netanyahu's government is threatening to dissolve it, then who is that is reneging on it? It's so dumb. I know. That's what's so frustrating about it. It's like, it's so glaringly obvious. It is so obvious who the spoiling party is. I saw a tweet from 2012 on the timeline earlier. Someone had brought it up again where this person was saying, like, hold on, let me see if I can find the tweet. I want to do it justice by just telling you exactly what the tweet was. Raphael Shimonov reposted this. Emily F in 2012 says Palestinians don't want peace, in air quotes, but Palestinians celebrate the ceasefire while 70% of Israelis are against the ceasefire. All the way back in 2012. Tell me who wants peace, like even on the population side. Anyway, here's the other story of the day. Shock moment. Blinken verbally accosted by anti-Israel heckler who gets removed from the press briefing.
Reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal in May? We all knew we had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing. Why did you sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism? Why did you allow my friends
The heckler is not a heckler. That's Max Blumenthal.
to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed when we had a deal in May? You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before.
He's a journalist.
Knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing. I'm happy to.
Which, once again, I will just say on the issue of Israel, Max is great. That's all I'm saying. Okay, don't bring me all of his other reporting. Don't come in here and start talking about Vladi-Poo or Syria or whatever. I don't listen. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're simply talking about Israel. Okay, he's locked in.
Why did you sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism?
Yeah, people are happy to be like, oh, well, what about his reporting on COVID? Like, yeah, I know.
Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed?
It's also additionally frustrating because one of his journalists was falsely apprehended and arrested by the Israeli state, an American citizen. Just, something to remember as well. All right. It's not just like, so for him, understandably, he's okay. The point of doubt on the annexation exchange speculation is that I'm not sure how Bibi plans to navigate this politically and come out on the other side. Smotrich said he'd leave if the war ends after phase 1. And Ben-Gvir says he'd leave if the deal is signed at all. Netanyahu's personal media channels divorced of any real ideology, but they've been committed to the absolute victory slogan for so long. He'd definitely have to get a security blanket from some political enemies. Yes. Jeremy Lafredo is the gray zone journalist that was arrested by the Israeli state.
When we had a deal in May, you helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascism.
I look forward to taking questions when I get a chance to
Your father-in-law was an
finish my
Israel lobbyist. Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through a genocide.
CNN called this cringy.
Repeatedly interrupted by some cringeworthy heckling by activists.
By activists, not your contemporaries, not your peers. But cringeworthy activist, chat. Nice reporting on that. By the way, the other person that they packed up in this process was not even someone who works for a gray zone, but Sam Husseini, who was violently and physically apprehended. I was seriously manhandled, but I'm back at home, he says. Thanks for all the support, folks. My intention was to ask tough questions at every opportunity during the news conference, which state personnel obviously cut short. Was the point of the May 31st announcement to block implementation of the May 24th ICJ order? Why do you refuse to recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Gaza? Everyone from Amnesty International to the ICC accuses Israel of extermination and genocide. Why are you not in The Hague? Why was your stepfather Pissar connected to both Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein? Miller here pretends not to know about the Hannibal Directive. Do you know about the Hannibal Directive? Why do you not even acknowledge Israel's nuclear weapons?
I carry in my pocket the names of those who have been arbitrarily detained and unfairly held hostage, unjustly held hostage, and bringing them home, returning them to their families, returning them. Finally,
get your hands off me! 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 Answer a damn question. Do you know about the Hannibal Directive? Do you know about Israel's nuclear weapons? Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press? You pontificate about a free press? You are hurting me.
It's so funny that we constantly have this conversation about like Chinese free speech and whatever. And it's like the moment that the American state feels weak, like a little shred of weakness, a sense of weakness from the American state, and immediately we're like, oh no, like we're doing the same stuff that we accuse all of our foreign adversaries of doing. And some of our foreign adversaries do these things, right? This is something that I talked to Chelsea Manning about a long time ago, but it's something that I try to repeat to people. America gets the quote unquote half free speech, but even then there are obvious limitations to it when someone threatens the established order. That's why the likes of whistleblowers such as Chelsea Manning have been violently punished for their crimes of revealing certain war crimes that the American government has conducted. That's why Edward Snowden has to live in exile. That's why Julian Assange was punished for almost a decade. Just something to consider here. But even outside of that, the more America's power diminishes on the global stage, the more you will see how hard they crack down on free press and free speech in general. And we still have an awesome amount of power on the global stage, and yet we're already doing this stuff. Just so you understand. It's going to get worse, by the way.
You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I ask him questions.
Respect the process.
Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please, sir, respect the process.
Like room full of journalists, room full of State Department journalists. Okay, these are NatSec reporters. Some of these guys are I mean, these guys are like 20-year, 30-year veterans in the field. Okay? This is a Democratic administration doing this, by the way.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process while everybody from Amnesty International, to the ICJ is saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal! Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague?
Finally, we work to modernize our diplomacy so that...
Yeah, incredible, dude. Yeah, imagine if Anthony Blinken was Chinese, dude. How much media coverage? What do you think CNN would say if this was happening in communist China? And not to say that it like there is free press or free speech in communist China or whatever. I'm not even claiming that. Okay? But just think, how would CNN cover this instance? How would CNN cover it? Do you think this is what they would say?
As you heard, he was repeatedly interrupted by some cringeworthy heckling by activists. I mean, we were both sitting here pretty stunned, frankly. This is supposed to be a press conference with a room of journalists. Those were activists who were interrupting the Secretary of State when he initially was thanking the press and talking about the Israeli-Hamas deal.
Yeah, I think it's really surprising. A lot of our viewers will have seen protests on Capitol Hill, for example, during confirmation hearings, but it's very rare for something like that to happen at the State Department. I'm over there all the time.
Yeah, because Sam Husseini was apprehended violently, not because he was like doing a cringeworthy protest, but for simply asking questions that they were both journalists. Yes. Both Max Blumenthal of Gray Zone and Sam Husseini are both like credentialed journalists that are allowed to be in that room. They're NatSec reporters. You might not like all of their output, okay? You might not like all of their coverage. You might not agree with them ideologically. Just imagine if Biden is doing a press conference and they do this to like to Douchey, okay? The Fox News reporter. They just come in with, you know, cops and pick him up. What do you think Fox News would do in that situation? They would burn the building to the ground, dude. Are you kidding me? Are you joking? And it wouldn't just be Fox News either. CNN would also be very upset. They would absolutely rip into the Biden administration. So CNN didn't even know they were journalists? No, they're just lying. That's the point. They know that they're journalists. But of course, it looks weird if they actively call them journalists, NatSec reporters. Then it calls into question why a mainstream media outlet, a legacy publisher, is on board with the State Department violently apprehending and kicking aside a credentialed reporter. So they can't say that. They have to simply say, "Oh, it's just a it's not a, you know, it's a cringe activist." Look at this. Look. Sam Husseini is routinely credentialed as a reporter to participate in State Department press briefings, and CNN Chiron says interrupted by man asking questions like it was some heckler who snuck into the room. CNN is going to complain day in, day out during Trump's administration about how they're mistreated, like they did during his first term, but they can't even call this out. Reporters shouldn't be dragged out of briefings and then detained and arrested.
You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I am asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please, sir, respect the process.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process. Well, everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you about Israel?
Wow.
So
I mean, you have no self-respect, dude. Like, straight up. Like, I get that these guys operate on a decent amount of Western chauvinism, a decent amount of, like, unexamined, resilient white supremacist attitudes. So, of course, when Palestinian colleagues of theirs are getting shredded by American weapons in the hands of the apartheid state, they rarely ever cover it. They rarely ever talk about it, right? Because they're monsters, but it's far away. But there is, at least in this profession, a sense of respect and a sense of honestly self-preservation that journalists are supposed to have, where they go out to bat for their colleagues because they understand that if a State Department does that to someone that they might not agree with, they could very quickly do that to them as well. And I love that, like, at this stage, the defense of Israel is such a higher priority for these guys that they straight up are talking about a credentialed reporter who is allowed to be there as though he is just some random heckler, dude. That's crazy. That's crazy because it's going to happen to them as well. Wait till Trump does this to a CNN reporter. I will, as is the case always, defend them. Okay? I will not be defending the Trump administration for being like, oh, bad vibes overall from CNN reporters, so they deserve it. I would defend it if this happened to a Fox News reporter for asking questions. Trump did it to a CNN reporter back then, and Fox News was the first to call it out. Exactly. There's like solidarity amongst reporters, especially in like America, okay? If this were to happen to any other reporter, all hell would break loose in media. This is exactly the type of like self-interested media fancy that reporters love covering over and over again because they love considering themselves to be like brave warriors that are facing serious repercussions for reporting on or engaging in what they consider as like adversarial journalism. But when actually adversarial journalism is happening at the State Department press briefing by a credentialed reporter, they cast him aside as though he is just some random heckler.
I'm in that briefing room, and you need to have a reason to be at the State Department. You need to have an appointment. You need to have press accreditation to come and go. So it's unclear who those people were. So I think there's a real security question there. Allow me to be cheesy for a moment. This is a testament to American democracy and the way that American administrations approach their press rooms. They give accreditation to a wide number.
Yeah, and also credit, really? This is a moment that is credit worthy. Let's praise them for giving credentials to reporters that don't deserve it. And sometimes they're just going to get their ass beat. That's crazy, man. You're a disgusting little monster. Shame on you. Shame on you. That's crazy. The American government arrests a credentialed reporter for asking questions in a State Department briefing from Anthony Blinken, and you choose to celebrate the fact that they even gave him a credential to begin with. What a ridiculous, like, I mean, does he have to say it in Korean for you to have some different opinions on it? Does he have to say it in Mandarin? Is that the only time where you'll go, wow, what a glaringly obvious display of having no intellectual honesty and no interest in preserving the sanctity of the fourth estate? Only our foreign adversaries engage in stuff like this. When we do it, it's not only just, but it's also a yet another indication of our virtue that we gave them credentials to begin with. Wow.
Of journalists, and increasingly what I would call less mainstream journalists, more opinion journalists, who have the opportunity to go to the State Department, to go to the White House, and to ask questions of the representatives of that administration.